Cool. Okay. So the two main pillars of ancient Judea, the things holding them up, are Second-Temple Judaism and Greco-Roman power. Okay. Why do we call it Greco-Roman? What are the two words there? Greek and Roman. So if you're familiar with Greek history, you've got Alexander the Great, who comes and conquers so much of the world that it essentially bums him out, that there's no more world for him to conquer. Okay. It's from as far west as like Spain all the way up to India, right? He is dominant over everything. And he develops this method of going into all these regions that he has conquered and implanting Greek ideas and Greek buildings, Greek city-states, all throughout the empire, so that no matter where you are within the empire, you can go somewhere and you can see structures that you kind of automatically know where they are. So like the gymnasium, we call it the gym, but it's the gathering place. It's kind of like a community center. You can tell what it looks like from the outside, and they're everywhere, okay? So that in any city in the empire, you know where you're supposed to go. Oh, that's the gymnasium. That's where all the men are doing their sports or learning or being educated or whatever it is. Amphitheaters. We see amphitheaters all throughout this region because Alexander is going around and putting them everywhere so that the whole empire feels unified. He's also thinking of himself as a god and naming so many cities Alexandria because he thinks he's so important. So if you're reading a text and it says Alexandria, you have to ask yourself, which Alexandria? What is it that we're talking about? You have to do the same thing with Antioch. There's like 6 Antiochs in the New Testament, and they're not all the same. Eventually, the Greeks start to decline and the Romans elevate. But the Romans don't go around and replace everything that the Greeks did. They go through and build on top of it. So for the Romans, you think of like Julius Caesar, who goes around and because of the way that he develops affection with his soldiers and the way that he essentially becomes the leader of the leaderless, the father of the fatherless. And he eventually becomes the Caesar, the emperor. But he doesn't go around and say, let's destroy all this Greek stuff and build our own Roman stuff. He just goes around and says, all right, all this Greek stuff is mine now. All these Greek things, we're just going to say that they're Roman. He doesn't actually make everybody speak Latin, which would be the Roman preferred language. He keeps Greek as the main language because Alexander did such a good job putting Greek everywhere. If you want to go anywhere and be able to exchange commerce or ideas, you have to speak common Greek. What's the word for common that we're used to from the New Testament? Common Greek. Anybody? Koine, yes. So there is this common form of Greek called koine that everybody is going to be able to speak. The same way that English now is kind of a universal language. You could go to Tokyo and you can carry out commerce in English. It's actually fascinating. A Japanese person from Tokyo can go to Baghdad, and the Baghdadi and the Tokyo person can exchange services in English, even though English is not either one of their native language. But English has become this common language that everybody uses, at least on some level, to exchange goods and ideas. Okay, this is what Koine Greek is at the time. This is important because our entire New Testament is written in Koine Greek. There are reasons why this is interesting and why this is important, because all of the New Testament authors, most of them are Hebrew. They're Jewish men, and they choose not to write in Hebrew. They choose not to write in Aramaic. They choose to write in Koine because this is going to be more influential. The Greco-Roman world also gives us the Pax Romana, which is essentially, if you're inside the empire, there's a sense of peace. There might be war and conflict on the outside, but inside, we are not going to have rebellions. We're not going to have robbers and burglars and raiders. We're going to have some sense of peace. How do they achieve this? One, what will the Roman Empire do if there is an armed rebellion in a small city? So say there's a little city. I love doing my little doodles, right? Here's a little city. and they decide that they are going to take up arms. Here's a sword. Here's another sword. They're going to take up arms and rebel against Rome. What does Rome do? It's a pretty easy answer. They destroy everything. They knock down every building. They kill every person. They salt the ground. They will not abide anyone rebelling against Rome. In fact, the Roman leaders who were sent to that city, if they allow a rebellion to get out of hand, the Roman leaders are executed also because they failed to keep the city in peace. Rome is terrified of factions, of divisions within the empire, to the point where they will not allow volunteer fire brigades. They say it's better if the city burns down than if you allow volunteer fire brigades where people might get together and start to undermine the empire. Any of these sort of factions, any of these divisions are terrible. They are horrible. We have to get rid of them. Another way that they instill this peace is through religious pluralism, religious syncretism, religious allowance. They do not care what you believe. As long as you're not creating factions, creating divisions against other people, we don't care. This is kind of the nature of most polytheism, where the Romans have their gods, the Greeks have their gods, but I think most of us know those gods are very similar and very interchangeable, right? Mars is the god of war, but so is Ares, and they're kind of the same god. So when they go and conquer Egypt and take over, they figure out, oh, you also have a god of war. That's the same as our god of war. We just all call them different names. We believe in all the other gods. We might only personally worship some of them ourselves, but the other gods exist. They're over there somewhere doing their own thing in their own place. This is all pretty normal. The Jews run into issues with this. We see this in the Old Testament, where they come along and say, well, I'm not going to offer sacrifices to your gods. Your gods don't even exist. And that's going to get them into trouble. We'll see this pop up again and again in the New Testament as well. It's not just the claim that I'm worshiping a god. It's the claim that you're wrong to worship your God. That becomes problematic. Or the claim, my God is real and yours is fake. Yours is invented by humans and mine is a living God. That becomes more problematic. That begins to question this piece of Rome. Okay? The Roman household is centered, it's kind of like this, and it's centered around a pater familias, the father of the family. I think we're all pretty familiar with this. Within the household, you would have his children, both sons and daughters. You would also have his clients, who are like business partners who probably work under him. So think of like a person now who owns 6 Taco Bells in the city. They don't run each of the Taco Bells. They have managers that run those Taco Bells for them. And then because you own them, you just get the money. You get the profit out of it. But you have a client. You have somebody who runs the building for you. Okay? So the pater might have the money to go and start up some business, but then he gets a client who works under him, who's considered part of the household, who runs that business for him. Part of the clients would be freedmen. So these are manumitted slaves, freed slaves. They used to be enslaved people and they're not anymore. And then at the very bottom here, you would have still enslaved people. Okay. Notice that there is a difference in freedmen and freemen. All right. It is different being a slave and being freed versus never having been a slave in the Roman system. Okay. I will say, if you are a slave, you can sell yourself into slavery because you don't have any money and you don't have any power. And you can attach yourself to a very wealthy, high-to-do paterfamilias. You sell yourself to him. And if you are a very good, very stable, very helpful, very economic person, eventually you might be able to become a freedman. You might be able to buy yourself out of slavery, or because you've expressed your importance to the pater, he will free you and you become this freedman. A lot of clients over here are freedmen. Now, you can never become a free Roman citizen. because of this. You can become a citizen because you're attached to the right guy, but you'll never become technically free, but your children will be. So if I want the best life for my children, I sell myself into slavery, I prove my worth, I get freed, and then I have a family. My children, when they grow up, will be free Roman citizens within this paterfamilias, within this Roman household. Good on this? This becomes hugely important for two reasons. One, when Caesar comes around, remember how I said Caesar was like the father to the fatherless? He goes around and picks up all these folks over here who don't actually belong to a really strong household. And Caesar says, I'm your father now. So he becomes the father of people who are spread throughout the empire who are devoutly loyal to him. So when he comes and says, all right, well, actually, I'm not just a senator. I'm the king. I'm the emperor now. I'm God now. All of these people say, yeah, you definitely are. Right? He has the support of everybody. He's essentially elected into the emperorship. This will also come into play when we see the New Testament. The people that get the people that accept the gospel most quickly are going to be these sorts of people down here on the totem pole, right? Every now and then you'll see somebody who is probably a paterfamilias who does get saved. Think of Cornelius. Peter goes and preaches the gospel to him. And what does it say? Cornelius accepts the gospel, and so does his whole household. That doesn't just mean Cornelius and his wife and children. Notice, actually, the wife is not in this household at all. The wife, even after she gets married and maybe moves out, still belongs here in the paterfamilia of her father, which becomes complicated. But this is a way that like one family doesn't accrue too much power and wealth and influence. When Cornelius gets saved, everybody in his house is said to have gotten saved. His clients, the people who run businesses for him, get saved. His slaves get saved. His freedmen get saved. His children get saved. This is what the text tells us, and we just kind of have to deal with that theologically. Good on this so far? We kind of talked about citizenship for a second. Being a Roman citizen grants you huge powers and privileges. I think the main thing that we see is the difference in the way the Romans treat Peter versus the way they treat Paul. Paul is a Roman citizen. Probably because, I mean, he's Jewish. He's got a Jewish name. He's very clearly not ethnically a citizen. It's probably that his father or his grandfather did something to earn citizenship. You could actually buy citizenship, or you could give money to a certain project. Hey, I'm going to donate and build an aqueduct in this city. And because of my generosity, I want citizenship. And the empire will come back and say, yeah, sure, you're a citizen now. So somebody in Paul's family did something like this before he was born, so that he is born a Roman citizen. Okay? Peter's not. Peter is never a citizen. So according to like Christian tradition, how is Peter executed? He's crucified. You cannot crucify a Roman citizen. Think of the stories in Acts when they arrest Paul and start beating him. Once they find out he's a citizen, they start issuing apologies, right? In the hopes that they don't get in trouble, right? If you're just a Roman soldier and you beat up a citizen, you could get killed for that because they protect their own. Paul is beheaded because that is the death prescribed for citizens. Let's keep going because we are cruising out of time. The other main pillar here is Second-Temple Judaism. Why is it called Second-Temple Judaism? Julian? Yeah. So think of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. Solomon builds a temple. Solomon is around in like 980 BC. Okay, he builds this temple, dedicates it to the Lord. It's this great big show. Eventually, this temple is destroyed. I think it's actually I might have a slide that shows it. Yeah, so I don't have to make up the dates off my head. That temple is destroyed in 586. Okay, so it exists from here, Solomon, all the way until 586. And the temple is destroyed when Babylon comes in and captures Jerusalem, captures Judah. All right. We'll just skip ahead. It's only from 586 to 539 that the temple remains destroyed. In 539, you think of books like Ezra and Nehemiah, where they get permission from the king in Babylon to go and rebuild the temple. They rebuild the walls, they rebuild the temple, they start to reinstate sacrifice. Okay. What we see further this way, what Julian referenced with the temple being rebuilt in Jesus' time, we see this, but it doesn't make a lot of sense because the temple is being rebuilt way back here. Let's see if he's in here. His name is not. So after 63 BC, the Romans come in and take direct control of Jerusalem, of Judea, and they install the Herodians, kind of as like puppet kings in Judea. They're Jewish technically, but they're installed by the Romans to be in control. So this is Herod the Great, Herod Antipas, etc. There's a bunch of Herods. The Bible might not always tell you which Herod is which. Herod is trying to gain favor with the Jews, and at this point in here starts it's not really rebuilding so much as renovation. He dumps money, public funds, into renovating the temple so that the Jews like him. Why would he do this? Well, if the Jews rebel, what happens to Herod? The Romans cut him out. Okay, so he tries to curry favor with the Jews by renovating the temple. That's what we see in Jesus' time. They're actually renovating the temple that's probably been rebuilt in some sense for 500 years at this point. Okay, but because the temple was destroyed back here in 586 and it is rebuilt now, it is called Second-Temple Judaism. Okay, so this is the Second Temple. There are so many developments that happen at this time period that are not in our Old Testament, right? Think of all these terms. None of this is in the Old Testament. I mean, maybe Samaritans are. But there is a huge amount of development between the last book in our Old Testament and what's happening in Jesus' time. One of the main things that develops is oral Torah. So teachings of the Torah that are not written down, that are oral stories, interpretations that are passed down. The Pharisees and the Sadducees will debate about the relevance of oral Torah. Should we accept this or should we not? The Pharisees are going to say, yes, we should accept oral Torah. We should accept these commandments and rules. We should include all of this stuff that we think is passed down to us by Moses. The Sadducees are going to be the opposite. They're going to say, no, we don't need all this oral tradition. We don't even need the whole Old Testament. We're just going to focus on the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. That's what is going to be our bread and butter. So the Pharisees and Sadducees are going to disagree on huge theological issues. Is there life after death? Is the Messiah coming? Which books of the Bible are we going to read and uphold? Okay, we will get into a lot of this sort of stuff. The point here is, all of these things come out of Second-Temple Judaism. These are not properly part of Judaism during the Old Testament. When Elijah is on the scene, he is not interacting with Essenes or Zealots or Sadducees or Pharisees. This is just not happening. By Essenes here, I mean, think of like the Dead Sea Scrolls, Qumran. It's this community that has withdrawn from Jerusalem temple worship because it's been corrupted by Rome, right? You guys have this puppet king installed. We do not want to participate in what you're talking about, okay? Zealots take that to the extreme. Instead of withdrawing, they say, I'm not going to withdraw. I'm going to take up weapons, right? I'm going to rebel against this puppet king and all these terrible Romans who are doing this stuff, and I'm going to go around and assassinate the highest, most important people that I can to try to overthrow Rome from the inside. Okay. One of Jesus' disciples is a zealot, a former zealot, I hope. But there's a guy running around named Simon who's called the Zealot. We can talk about these guys later. This is like the Maccabean revolt. We already talked about the Herodians. I think somebody brought up the Sanhedrin for a second. This is like the governing body within the religious life of Jerusalem. They don't really have a lot of authority politically, but they have a lot of authority over like the lives and practice of Jews. The Sanhedrin, it means the 70. There's probably actually 71 people that are doing this, but they're just religious leaders who vote and argue and teach on stuff. Okay. Samaritans, we're familiar with this, but look right back here. If you're familiar, the kingdom divides after Solomon, right? Into a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom, north and south. All right. The northern kingdom says we have our own temple, we have our own practices. So they actually build a temple on Mount Gerizim and say we're going to offer sacrifice here instead of the one that's on, what we would call like Mount Zion in Jerusalem. This is eventually captured by Assyria and they fall. And when they come back, Assyria sends a ton of their own people and they intermarry with them. And the northern kingdoms are kind of wiped out. They eventually become Samaria, right? The former northern kingdom that is now so, I think the southerners would probably say, infected with Gentiles that they're really not Jewish anymore at all. To use like the racial slur, they're half-breeds, right? Which is kind of offensive even in our time to say something like that. But that's really what the southern folks think. These Israelites are not true. At this point, once they separate, this is where you get the term Jews, because they come out of the tribe of Judah and they are Judean. And so you can hear the similarity in the words. Before then, back here, they're Israelites because they come from Israel right here. It's at this point that they really become Jews. So in our time that we're talking about with Jesus, Jews or Judeans refer specifically to those southern people in Jerusalem, in Judea. The Samaritans are half-breeds. They gave in to the Gentiles. They intermarried because of their own sin and shortcomings. Good on this? I think I have one more slide. And I know you guys have to go to chapel. So we also have so many texts about Second Temple Judaism. Because we're out of time, we'll actually just pick up here.